presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Almost good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending. As Michelle so generously introduced me, my name is Don Adkins. I am the Program Assistant for Water Conservation with focus towards irrigation. Part of my duties are I am one part of a two-person mobile irrigation lab. What that is a free service provided by Manatee County through the Utilities Department. And we go out to any of the residents in Manatee County that have a operational irrigation system, and we perform a irrigation and landscape evaluation. Once on site, we will do a lot of mapping and collect a lot of data so that we can prepare for you, the homeowner, very in-detailed reports, making recommendations as to how you can, changes that you can make with your irrigation system, repairs that may need to be made, upgrades, along with a focus on the landscape also, because we all want to see nice lawns and landscapes, but it all comes at the cost of how much water we use. So we'll get started. What I'll be going over tonight is designing your irrigation system. Okay,
Sometimes, Don, I have to use the arrow buttons.
That's what okay, there we go. That's what I did. It froze up for a minute. The objectives tonight will be to review some irrigation terms. You'll hear me say frequently through the night. If you don't understand what I'm saying, please shoot a question. One of my colleagues will answer, or they'll cue it to me for me to answer, or for me to slow down. I hope to help you understand your irrigation system and the various components of it, determine how to set up an irrigation zone if you do not have one, if you do, how things you may be able to change to make it, again, more efficient. And we'll discuss a simple design. Irrigation, there's a slide missing, I think, yep. One second. One of the things I always stress when I do my class, I don't know what happened to the slide, but all of you as property owners, before you dig, start digging on your property. Always, always, always. If it's to put in plants, especially if you're going to be close to the right of way, or to make changes or repairs to your irrigation system, please call 811. It is a free service. They will come out within a day or two, and they will do locates on all of the utilities, because any digging you do, if it impacts the utilities, it will go back on you as the homeowner because you did not exercise that step. One of the utilities that is out there and is becoming more encountered is fiber optic. And I always use an example. When I worked in private industry, a project that we were working on was with Florida Power and Light, and another contractor that was working a little further down the road. They didn't bother to get their locates, and their auger tapped into a fiber optic line. The fine starts at $10,000. And by the time it was said and done, they had expended over $250,000 for repairs. So very important. I always encourage everyone. It's a free service. Use it. Irrigation mechanics. Going to be talking about the components of the irrigation system. If you're in an older home and your irrigation system is provided potable water through the county's water distribution system, your part of the irrigation system starts on your property side of the meter, be it potable water and or non-potable water. If you have a meter for non-potable water, your responsibility begins on the property side of the meters. From there, it will go through the Backflow Preventer. Every home in Manatee County that is connected to potable water. Myself, my property is agriculture, as many of my coworkers are. Most of us are on well water, so we do not have a backflow preventer, but living in the communities, you would have access to potable water for your indoor water for your showers, your baths, your dishwasher, and such. You are required to have a backflow preventer, and that is there to protect the county water in the event that there is a breakage on your side of the meter. It prevents any back siphon into the county's main line. That is a component that is required to be inspected annually every year. All of you that have the backflow preventer, you're already aware of that wonderful device. Those of you that are connected to potable water but haven't had to install the backflow preventer because you haven't pulled any permits on your property or anything like that, it will be coming. So just to be aware, it is a requirement. The next component of the irrigation system is the controller, one that it's for the most part a very easy thing to operate and set up, but if you're not familiar with it, when you look inside there and start looking at the dial on it and all the different settings, it's easy also to get confused on. And all the controller does, it is a clock, plain and simple. It once it's set up with the time of day that it is currently, it will operate from that. From there, you'll set up the start time and then the run duration time for each zone, and you'll select what days that you irrigate on. And then from there, that is as simple as it gets for one of the controllers. And then you can put it in the auto mode, and it will control your system coming on at the time that you set it. Once the last zone is run, it will shut down then. And so the next component are the emitters, the various types of spray heads that you would have in your turf grass and landscape beds. If you have an irrigation system, most of you are probably very familiar with the pop-up spray heads. They are generally set to anywhere from 0 to 360-degree spray pattern. Their purpose and design is for in the turf grass areas, the narrow areas between homes, but always in the turf grass area because they do put out a high volume of water, anywhere from 0.75 gallons per minute up to 2.5 gallons per minute, depending on what the spray pattern is. Rotors, the next type of spray head, again designed for turf grass area and for large areas of turf grass. Again, they are set, you can adjust the setting on them from 0 to 360 degrees, but they are also they use a high volume of water, anywhere from 2 gallons per minute upwards to 5.5 and 6 gallons per minute per head. So if you have a zone that has 4, 6, 8 of the rotors, and they're doing a mix between 180 degrees and 360 degree spray pattern, you can imagine how much water that you're putting out using that. So the design is very important. So you have the overlapping areas of coverage, the right spray head in the right area to irrigate the right thing, and checking for the correct spray pattern. Many times, bear in mind that most of the spray heads and the rotors are retracted down into the soil more times than they're extended. So they do need maintenance. They do need inspection periodically. Right, if you have a rider mower, or if you have a service that mows your lawn, the zero turn mowers with the operator on it, that's close to 2,000 pounds running over those heads, and you make a wheel turn over top of them not knowing it, it can turn the head so that when it comes up, it's misaligned or it's spraying over into the landscape. So they all do need inspection, and it's also a piece of equipment that's made by man. So guess what? It's guaranteed to fail at some time in its lifetime. I'm living with that now. I was telling Michelle earlier, my air condition went out at the start of our summer on Friday evening, and you do not know how much you miss something until it's broke, but they will all break. All things made by man, they're designed, they're going to fail sooner or later. And the other type of emitter is micro irrigation. This is designed to be used in your landscape beds. It is ultra low volume. Because of that, you would always want to use that on its own zone on the controller with its own control valve. The control valves, those are merely electromagnetic switches that are in line with the flow of water to each of the zones. When the controller sends a signal for zone 1 to open up, it's a gate valve. The electromagnetic switch will open up the valve, releasing the water from the control valve to the various irrigation heads. Those, for the most part, are going to be buried in your lawn someplace. In the older homes, they're generally buried within the area of the zone that it covers. Newer homes, they are getting wiser to the installation, and they're putting them all centrally located in a single box so that they're easily accessible. And again, it's a piece of equipment made by man, so guess what? It's going to fail. The next component is the moisture sensing devices. This would be your rain sensor. Generally, you see it in the depiction on your screen. You'll see it hanging off of the roof there. The wording under it is called Smart Control. It's actually wireless, but it is connected to the controller. And what this does is we get rainfall. As soon as it's detected the amount of rain that it's set at, which should be 3/4 of an inch, it will then turn the system off. There are 4 different types of moisture sensing devices. I only have 3 listed there. The rain sensor is the most basic, and that's what's depicted on the screen. Again, it will shut the system off as soon as it detects 3/4 of an inch, and then it will not allow the system to reactivate until the sensors there have dried out the way they operate. There's a plunger going down through the middle of the switch that has 7 cork or leather discs on it. Those cork or leather gets wet, it swells up, thus depresses the plunger, which sits on top of the switch in the bottom of the housing, breaking the circuit to the controller. So once they get wet, they will expand and will turn the system off, and then it typically takes between 24 and 36 hours once the rain event has ceased to dry out and then reactivate the system. The next, pardon me, the next sensor is the soil moisture sensor. It is a component that is actually buried in the ground someplace in your turf grass area. Um, Most properties, there's only a need to have one soil moisture sensor, but on larger properties that have different elevations in it and different soil makeup in it, they could not require, but benefit from having a second one. And talking with the people out in the field, I've since learned that they are also using both a soil moisture sensor and the rain sensor. The reasons why is the rain sensor will turn the system off immediately. The way a soil moisture sensor works, when they come on, so once you order one, you will want someone that's certified and been trained to install it, because they actually have to come out and survey your property to find the place on your property that is a fair representation of your overall property. From that, they will do a percolation test to see how fast the water runs off. Pardon me 1 minute. Sorry about that. But they will, after they percolate, they're looking for how long does it take that spot to dry out, because once the sensor is in place, what it's doing is actually measuring the moisture in your soil. So if you have a real sandy soil, it's going to hold the water for a very short, if any, period of time. If you have a soil that's high in clay content, most likely it's going to maintain a level of moisture even throughout the summer and our dry months. Or if you have what you ideally want is a soil that's referred to as loam, and it's actually a mixture of all three, some gravel, grit, or fill dirt, sand, and some clay content. It's not bad having some clay, but a lot of the newer homes, because the lots are generally built up with the fill that they remove as they dig the retention ponds in your community, that's what they'll build the base with, and then they'll overfill it with fill dirt. So leaving you with a very compact and a soil that has a high clay content, so it's holding more moisture. And the moisture sensor, once they've surveyed it, percolated it, then they can calculate and set the sensor to what percentage of moisture that they want to allow before it will allow the system to activate. So it's actually measuring the moisture in the soil. So it's a lot more accurate than just the standard rain sensor. The third one that's not listed here is a web-based service. And what you would do is you would apply to a web-based weather service, and you have a monthly fee. It's generally no more than $6 a month, and then it's controlling your system. The problem with that is the web service here, it draws its information from the meteorological site over in Hardy County and Ona, about 35 to 40 miles east of us here in Manatee County. And if you've lived in Florida long enough, you've seen it rain on one side of the street and not the other. So it could be raining and it's picking up the information in Hardy County and it's sending a signal to your program to not operate. So, and plus there's a monthly fee that goes with that. And then the fourth one is a Evapotranspiration system. And basically what that is a weather system on your weather monitoring station on your home. It measures wind speed, relative humidity, rainfall. It takes all sorts of measurements. It's very accurate, but again, you're installing a weather station on your home. I've seen some smaller ones, but they are still very noticeable. And plus, there's a lot of components there that, guess what, they can have a tendency to break. This is a better depiction of a system in ground. Again, coming from the water meter, the U-shaped brass piece, your backflow preventer, the valves you see buried in the box. The water, once the water is turned on to the system, it's always constant to the control valves. It will not go past the control valves until the irrigation controller in your home, at your home. Generally, it's inside the garage or on the outside wall of your house. The control valves will not release the water to the irrigation heads until it receives a signal from the controller. Water source. Two types of water. Potable water, that's our drinkable water. Here in Manatee County, it comes from two sources. If you've lived in Manatee County long enough, you're familiar with Lake Manatee, which is out east on State Road 64. It's about a 3,000 acre reservoir that the county purchased back in the 50s. The county commissioners, looking ahead, they purchased it. Unfortunate for them, the community was against it at that time, and come election time, they all lost their jobs. They were all voted out of office. Believe it or not, the residents at that time didn't see a value in it. Now, the reservoir, Manatee County Utilities manages that property, manages the reservoir, and how the water is used from there. Once they, as they start to distribute water through the main lines, it comes out of the reservoir, and then they also use deep injection wells that draw water from the Florida aquifer. And it's mixed at a rate of 2 gallons from the reservoir. For every 2 gallons that comes from the reservoir, they add a gallon from the aquifer. Why is this so important? 2 reasons. We maintain a water source here that we're not overly affecting the aquifer, the Florida aquifer, which is basically a freshwater river that is underground, runs from the northern tip of the state all the way south to Miami. But we're not putting a great strain on the aquifer because we are using more of the water from the reservoir. And the other is, in the state of Florida, of all 67 counties, Manatee County is the only one that actually has that particular type system, that we have a reservoir. Other counties, they have built reservoirs, but we maintain a natural reservoir that is self-replenishing. And so it actually, again, of the 67 counties in the state of Florida, Manatee County's water usury rates, meaning your water bill, is less than any other county in the state. So even though back then the county commissioners, they had forward thinking, it cost them their job, but it's turning out as a great thing. And the other is, at the with the rate of development that's going on in Manatee County, the last comprehensive plan, which goes over all these factors between the reservoir and the aquifer, if we were to stop getting rain, we have a resource that will carry Manatee County into 2050. So 30 more years that we have of supplyable potable water. And that's our drinking water. Reclaimed or non-potable water, it is non-drinkable. Comes from either water reclamation facilities or water treatment plants. Someone is raising their hand. Michelle or Valerie, is there? Oh, yes, ma'am. Is it Cheryl Murray Powell?
I'm sorry, Don. Did you need help? I had just stepped away for a minute.
I have one person raising their hand.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, if you have a question, then if you want to put it in the Q&A or in the chat, we'll help you. Otherwise, did you ask how many people did such and such?
No, I did not.
Okay, well, I'll see if I can fix that for you.
Okay. Again, I apologize. We are very new, or I am very new to this part of technology. I never prepared myself to be on video, TV, or none of that. So, but while Michelle is relating to that, reclaimed water or non-potable, again, it comes from the water. Pardon me?
I'm sorry. What was the name? I don't see the hand raised on my screen.
Last name was Powell.
Okay,
Esquire.
Thank you.
That is the water runoff from the lawns, from the roadways during after a rain event or storm event or washing your cars. That all collects in the stormwater drains and will typically go to a water treatment facility where they will clarify it, filter it, treat it to where it can be redistributed to be used for irrigating lawns. Generally, you'll know this by purple lines coming up to your property. That's always the indicator of reclaimed water, and absolutely do not drink it. You will regret it. But another form of non-potable water, reclaimed water, many of the communities in Manatee County have pumps and wells that augment their stormwater retention ponds, and they actually draw their irrigation from the ponds. So there again, anything that goes on your lawn has the ability to either run forward towards the street into the stormwater drains, or from the back run into the stormwater ponds, at which time the community will have pumps that supplies that water on certain days to allow for irrigation of the properties, and each home by its address will have their day set. And then the other source is the private well. Again, myself, many of my coworkers living on agriculture land, we have wells that are put in that provide our water source for our homes. That is potable water. It is drinkable. You may want to have aeration system added or a water treatment system added, but well water is water coming from the aquifer. Got a question here from Ryan Smith. Well water, absolutely. You can use that for your irrigation system if that's what you have available to you. System, some design considerations. First and foremost is your system pressure. If your water is coming from the county or even the city utilities, you can contact the utility department and find out what is the water pressure provided to your property. That is going to be, because that's going to factor in how many heads you can use per zone, how long a run you can use in the design for each zone, moving the water from, if it's provided by the county, it's coming from the roadside where the water main is, how much reduction you will need to do from the start of your run to the end of your run, again, depending on how long that run's going to be. So you maintain an adequate pressure to operate each of those systems efficiently. Each one of the spray heads, they typically require anywhere from 28 to 32 psi at the end of the line of that zone for each of those heads to operate properly. Rotors will require 50 to almost 60 psi, again, depending how long the run is. They will require 48 to 60 psi to properly operate. Micro irrigation, again, it's ultra low volume, so it requires a pressure of less than 20 psi. So in most cases, coming from the water main, your water pressure is going to be about 65 psi. So if it's going to a zone that is micro irrigation, that control valve is going to have a pressure reduction valve in it, because you've got to get that pressure down so it doesn't blow the system out. You can't overpressure the system. Flow, the amount of water that's running through your system at the end of each line, you want to calculate how many gallons per minute. One of the things you can do, hose bibs on your home, stopwatch, timer on your watch, on your phone, get a gallon bucket, open up the hose bib fully, get your timing device ready, insert the bucket, and time exactly at the same time, start the timer, and then watch how long does it take to fill that gallon container. And then you'll be able to calculate how many gallons per minute that your water is providing through your system. The controller, design consideration. As you look at your property and you figure out how many zones you're going to need, there are controllers out there that will only do 2 zones. So I always recommend get a controller that has at least 2 zones more than what your original design is, because in time you may want to change things around. So if you start out installing just 4 zones and you get a controller that will only control 4 zones, but then you put some other beds in or some hanging plants that you want to run micro irrigation to, you then you would have to get a different controller so you can add the increased number of control valves and zones. So most of them out there, though, are generally anywhere from 4 up to the Weathermatics. It's just in count, they can go up to, I think, there's about 72 different zones there for commercial properties. But I have seen them own homeowners properties. It's kind of overkill, but that's what the developer put in. But most of the controllers out there are typically designed to control anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 and so on. Some of them have places where you can add modules to them, again, to give you that flexibility to add zones to your system without having to change the controller out, because that can get expensive at times. Know your irrigation system. Make a map of your property and go out, do an inspection, run your system in manual, know where each of the zones are, have a brief knowledge of where each of the control valves are if you can find them, but also where each of the irrigation heads are, and inspect them at that same time. The electrical wires, how it's ultra low voltage that goes from the controller to the control valves, but you're still going to have to calculate, depending where that control valve is, how much wire, how many strands you're going to need, and how long a run you're going to have to run, how many zones are needed, and the square footage of each of your zones. That's one of the key factors when designing your system pressure, your overall square footage for your property, and then start mapping out what is the square footage of each of the zones that you want to set up. And a real easy way of measuring your square footage, go to either Google Maps or Google Earth and go to the map program, bring up the satellite view of your property. And the capability that is there that you can measure, and it'll allow you to draw on your property the overall size of your property, how many square footage, or if you wanted to start making your plan of zones. Again, it's a great tool that's free to you. I've seen people call out surveyors to do it. Again, that's not needed. The best thing to do is that you will get really close on the square footage with that, close enough to do a design. And then you're going to want to decide on what type of rain sensing device you want it. And here's the thing on the rain sensing device I forgot to mention. How many of you know that that device with an operational irrigation system is required by law? July of 2009, Florida legislature created a statute, 373.62. If you have a home in Florida connected to a potable or non-potable water source that with which you are irrigating your landscape, turf grass, and landscape beds, you are required to have and maintain one of the rain sensing devices. Most of them we see out there are the basic rain sensors, but we are seeing more and more of the soil moisture sensors. But it is a requirement, and believe it or not, anytime the government creates a statute, there is a education phase, which we are. There's a compliance phase, and then there's also an enforcement phase. So there is enforcement out there for it. So beware. We are not it. We are simply educators. I have the responsibility to make sure that I make you aware of that. It is a statute, and there is enforcement for it, and the fines begin at $100 per citation. Michelle, is this a good time to do a poll?
I was just going to say that. I was just about to say, hey, I'll launch it for you if you don't mind. There we go. So all you should have to do is either use your mouse to click on an answer, or if you have a touch screen, just use your finger to click on an answer. There's 4 questions and it'll take you to the next one, or you may have to scroll down, but there are 4 questions. If you could answer, that would be wonderful. And when we're done, we'll discuss. Oh, wow. Everybody wants to learn everything.
Boy,
today. No.
The weight is on me now, isn't it? Should have did that one first so I could check out and run. So, is that 100% of everybody?
No.
No.
No. We've got quite a few more to answer.
And I promise all of you, don't judge this by this class. I do this much better in person. I generally have training aids up that I show everybody, and so this is
Don, you're doing fine. You're doing
but
good.
I mean, this is new. This platform for me is new. So, but don't judge me by this, please. As you see our classes scheduled again, sign up. They get better in person.
Yeah, but it's nice to have this offering as
have
well.
this tool. Now, it's another
Yeah.
tool to the toolbox, just like the drones.
We have just maybe a couple more people that are finishing up the questions. So it looks like the winner is folks want to know how to design the irrigation system as a whole. So that's good. And then everybody also, next most popular is how to save water, then how to fix their irrigation system, how to add on to their irrigation system. And nobody put I don't know. So everybody knows why they're here tonight, which is great. Most of folks are not participating in the rebate program. And we have a couple that may not know about the rebate program. So I don't know if you have that at the end of your presentation, but we should cover it.
If I don't, I will address it.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to end the poll. So thank you for participating.
Thank you, everyone that are still with us. Let me close this out. But the rain sensing device went over that. Again, it's required. There is a statute and there is enforcement. So okay, free up. The system water pressure, and the first item there is a super great resource. Anything that I don't cover, anything that you have questions about your irrigation system, YouTube is a great resource. You can go on there, basically everything I'm telling you today, and they'll provide you actual video format of it, from how to set up your controller, how to adjust your irrigation heads. But as I was saying, the water pressure, typically needed is 30 to 65 psi. For micro irrigation, you're going to want to get that down below 20. And there's a pressure regulator that can be put in line, or the control valve, you can buy one that is already set for micro irrigation. But if you have a question about what is the pressure at as it comes onto your property, contact the utilities department, Manatee County. You can go to the Manatee County website and all their information is listed there, and they will be able to tell you, are you using potable water and what the water pressure is, or if you're using non-potable from the water treatment facility, what the pressure is they're providing to your property. How many zones? Again, you're going to want to know the area of your property, the square footage. You want to go to whichever type of irrigation heads you're using, be it rotors or the pop-up spray heads, and micro irrigation. You're going to want to know what is the precipitation rate of each nozzle, how many gallons per minute that each nozzle is capable of at X water pressure. Again, like I said, rotors generally require between 48 and 55 psi to properly operate, and that's at the end of the run. So if you have rotors set up in your back side of your property, that run could be over 100 feet. And so in doing that, you have to keep reducing the diameter of your distribution pipe size, be it the flexible pipe or rigid PVC pipe. You will have to reduce that so you're guaranteed to have that pressure at the end of the run. And then for your area, so you can calculate the math is there. You take the area times the precipitation rate, that will equal your gallons per minute, and divide it by 96.3. 96.3 is a set constant number when you're calculating that area, and that'll give you, that'll tell you how many heads you need to use within each zone to have how much area you can cover, how many square feet you can cover per that zone with that pressure. The depiction you see there, like I said, there's a myriad of controllers out there. Hunter, Rainbird, Toro, Orbit, Weathermatic. Trying to think of the one. There's a new one that has come out that is completely automated, and it's controlled by your cell phone, by an app on your cell phone or tablet or computer. But as you can see in that depiction, there is a myriad of them out there. The large green box you see off to the right in the center, that one, if you have it and it's still working, don't change it out. Those last forever. Very simple to operate. All of them are relatively simple to program and set up. There's so many, and they all have a different way of programming them. So if you have an in-ground irrigation system with a controller, I would ask how many of you know where your your operations manual is for your controller. Generally, that's the first thing that's lost. If you do not have an operations manual for your controller, take the type of controller you have, go to that manufacturer's website and input what model you have, be it a Rainbird ESP 4TM, a Hunter X-Core or Pro C, Orbit. They have a model number on them. It's a 5-digit number. Toro's the same way, but you can go to their website and you can download a PDF of the operations manual. Between YouTube and that, all great resources to maintain. Again, my favorite's the one in the middle, but my favorite doesn't count because I do not have irrigation. But those just tend to last forever. Lot of nurseries throughout Manatee County and Hillsborough County still use those. But all of the other ones, Rainbird ESP, and someone always asks me, what does the ESP stand for? Rainbird made it extra simple programming. Literally, that's what it stands for. You twist the dial around, select each one of those components in the blue or the gray on the left side, and just do what it tells you to by the arrow keys left and right, or like your cursor plus and minus, self-explanatory. But the ESP on all of them stands for extra simple programming.
Hey Don, we do have a question. So the question is, if my irrigation system goes off during a rainstorm, would I assume that the rain sensor is not working correctly?
That would be a fair assumption, but not necessarily. The rain sensor, if it's properly located where it's unobstructed to the sky, I would still go out and examine it at first to, one, make sure the wire connections are complete, and the other thing is take the cap off the top, because I have found wasps trying to make a nest inside those, ants building their colony inside there. They need to be cleaned periodically and tested periodically. Again, it goes back to doing that routine maintenance on it. After that, after you've checked there's no obstruction to it, a way of testing it yourself is activate your system and then either take your garden hose and soak it if it's reachable without having to climb up a ladder. We use a 1,000 milliliter test tube that I will pour into the sensor at least 3 times to make sure before I rule it that it's not operational. After doing all that and it still doesn't work, yep, it's not operational. And
one other thing though is sometimes some of the older ones especially, it takes quite a few rain droplets before it triggers it. So if your irrigation system had come on and it starts raining, unless you have one of those immediate sensors, it may take a little bit before the rain sensor recognizes the moisture.
For it to, you know, indicate 3/4 of an inch is where you should be, is the recommended setting, correct? And that's the reason why, like I said, when I test them on site, I generally do 3 dumps of water into it. I want to make sure if I take and use the water hose to spray it with and test it, I spray it for a period of time before I rule that it is non-operational. So just give it some time, check it, but also don't rule it out just because it didn't shut off that time. It could be something has built a nest in there, the mud daubers build up in there and they block it from actually working. So it needs inspecting, maintenance, and check the wiring. Sometimes a wire gets knocked loose. And if it's down at landscape level, look at it real close too, because some of the clippings can get in there, and or the hedge trimmers have cut the wires. There's just do a thorough inspection before you rule it out that it is failed. The irrigation control valves, and I get many questions as to where are my control valves at, how can I find them if you do not already know. Older homes, they are typically located somewhere within the zone that is controlled, that it's controlling. So activate the zone, find out what portion of your lawn that zone 1 is, and you can either a metal detector or a probing rod, and start walking that zone back and forth until you hit something hard, because they're going to be inside of a cylindrical rain cover box. Generally, it's a shade of green the cover is. And the other way of locating them is there are services that have acoustic devices to where they will come out, activate it, and they go walking through. And what they're listening for is the flow of water, and they'll find where it stops at, and they'll start probing before they dig. And once they have a good location for it, then they'll put a flag. That's where your control valve is. Newer homes, most 90% of them that I've seen as we're out doing the MIL, the control valves are all centrally located, and typically they're in very close vicinity to the controller. If it's in the garage, it'll be right outside the garage wall. There'll be a lower, depending on how many control valves there is, but there'll be a rectangular box. It's going to be buried also, but hopefully the grass hasn't grown over it to cover the top, and they're inside there. The item extending off of the right of the control valve, that's at like a 45-degree angle, that is a filter. There's a screen inside that. All of your control valves, your system should have filters on it, no matter where your water comes from, be it potable or non-potable. If your irrigation source is potable, I guarantee you, we've done a dam tour, our team, and they walked us through all the processes, and before the water leaves that facility, it is filtered, refiltered, filtered again, and filtered some more. But small particulates can always get through. Smaller ones, especially if they're positively charged, they attract other ones. Other ones build up, become large particulates. So you should always have a inline screen filter built into at your control valve. If you are irrigating non-potable water from the treatment facility, or it's coming from the stormwater retention ponds, I definitely strongly advise, again, they filter it, but coming from the retention ponds, The intakes are generally set at about a foot off of the bottom, and the pumps they use, 5 horsepower, they have a lot of draw, so they will draw material up in it, and their screens could be broken. So it's always a wise idea. It'll prevent you some headaches, because if contaminated water blocks up that gate valve, then you're going to be needing to take the top of the valve off and flushing the whole system. The other mechanical part, you see the 2 wires coming out of, that's the electromagnetic switch. That's connected to the controller, and its whole job is simply to open and close at the set time the gate valve, which releases the water to the zones. And you will always have 1 control valve per zone. There's a depiction of where they've mounted them all together. Another thing I always tell the classes is, if you're new to Florida, when you open that up, don't be surprised by toads, tree frogs, spiders, and the occasional snake will be found inside that box too. So before you go inserting hands in there, grab a flashlight, do a good thorough inspection just to make sure. A lot of times the frogs, they mostly scare you. I don't worry about snakes. I generally can see them before they see me. My fear is spiders. I have a healthy respect and dislike for spiders, but I have seen inside those boxes black widows, and they are highly toxic. So look around real good before you go inserting hand. Common problems with the control valves, leaking valves. If they're older, the tops, they are sealed. They have an O-ring, but over time, everything deteriorates. The solenoid, that's the electromagnetic switch coming out of the top. It can go bad, easily replaced. There's the third one is the biggest, buried or lost valve boxes. You just got to find them. Poor valve manifold design. They've got it set at the one that's the wrong pressure for that type of run. And then the one I just talked about, pests inside the valve boxes. I've seen it all inside of them. So again, flashlight, a good visual inspection before you start inserting your hands, because you might get a surprise. Zones, you need to determine what each zone is going to be made up and what type of nozzle. And this is all towards being efficient, water conservation. Your turf, you want the right zone in the right area, and you want the right coverage. Turf grass, you want high volume type nozzles, and that depends on the shape of that. Narrow areas, you would want to use the pop-up or the multi-streams, or the pop-up spray heads, where they're just covering a set area. Each one of the nozzles on the pop-up spray heads, the radius of the spray pattern most of the time can be adjusted, but what can't is the distance, the circumference of the spray pattern. Meaning if it's a 12-foot, it may be a 12-foot nozzle. Well, from the center of that spray head, it's only going to, no matter which direction, it's going to spray out 12 feet from it. So those are things to look at. How big is that zone? How much of your neighbor's property you want to irrigate? Things like that. Rotors, again, you can adjust the rotational pattern. You can also, through the top of the note, you can adjust it from a straight stream to a fan stream, which will fan out the spray pattern, and that will reduce the distance. But rotors, you would generally use in your backyard in large turf grass areas. And then in your landscape beds, you want to look at using micro irrigation or a low volume type of soaker hose, drip lines, the Maxi Jet sprayers, shrublers on trees, drippers, but all of those are designed for ultra low volume. Their control valve is typically going to be less than 20 psi of water coming up pounds per square inch, and it's going to keep it down to they're measured. All the other spray head nozzles, the rotors and the pop-ups and the multi-streams, they're measured in gallons per minute always. Micro irrigation is measured in gallons per hour, so there's a multiple of 60 different. So there's where your a lot of your conservation will come in. And the other thing with your conservation is designing it so you have head-to-head coverage to where one head is reaching at least 80% of the distance, if not 100% of the distance in line. So you have those interlocking spray rain patterns, so the area will get covered faster, so you have to run fewer minutes on your clock, again, conserving water. And the trees, new homes, they always install them, they'll have bubblers at them. After about the first year, that tree is self-sufficient, and it's going to have pop-up spray heads around that are irrigating the turf grass. So they're getting water into their roots through the other irrigations there. The only time you really need the bubblers is through the first year of establishment of that tree to get the roots setted in and get them to where they're working and spreading out into those zones. Another thing to take in consideration for your landscape beds is once the plants are established or they have been established for a long period of time, if they are the right plant, the right place, Florida-friendly type landscape plants, as long as there's not a man-made obstacle, they may need no additional or supplemental irrigation to it because their roots have moved down into the turf grass zone, and that's where all the plants are taking their water from, is the roots. So if you have established perennials, hedges and things like that that have been there for a period of time and there's not a sidewalk separating them, in situations like that, you can even turn your micro irrigation off because they're getting their water out into that turf grass zone. Irrigation distribution, the types of heads, again, rotors and spray heads. Rotors are for medium to large turf areas. Distribution, they work in a 360-degree pattern, and depending on which type of heads, on the right you see a depiction there showing how you adjust them. And again, with your operations manual, if everything is there, you can also download from whoever the manufacturer site is, a PDF that will tell you how to adjust it. A lot of them, like the rain that's in the lower right portion of the screen, it'll have two adjustments, one that adjusts the rotation and the one up front adjusts the spray pattern coming out, and it also allows you to change that nozzle. I know that the Rainbird nozzles, the tool that they give you is all it is an Allen key with a fancy handle, and then the Hunter heads, you utilize just a small flathead screwdriver to adjust them. But for the rotors, the minimum PSI you need is 40 to 65 PSI, depending on the run. Your distance, how far it's going to spray the water from the center line of the head is anywhere from 30 to 50 feet, depending on which nozzle is selected. And the flow pattern is anywhere from 2 to 5.56 gallons per minute. So again, that's for medium to large areas that you want to cover. shows a depiction of in the bottom and the right of the rotors working and how they're overlapping. If you look at the one in the middle, without that overlapping, what we refer to as head-to-head coverage, each one of those heads, nothing would be irrigating the water closest to them. They're just picking up a mist. So they're dependent on the next head in the line to cover that area. And the better the overlap you have, the more you can reduce that run time. There's a better depiction of it. And again, it's for large turf grass areas. That's a depiction of the standard pop-up spray heads. Most of the time, like I said, they're recessed in the ground far more than they are extended. The nozzle on top, which that's that little cap in the middle, the range, which is the distance, which is anywhere from 2 feet to 20 feet. Again, that's from the center line. But that screw, little flathead screw in the middle, you can adjust the rotational pattern though, or the spray pattern. It doesn't rotate, but you can adjust it anywhere from 0 to 360 degrees. So that gives you some flexibility on areas that have landscape up front and then turf grass that has a curving sidewalk. Not everything is right angles. A lot of curving sidewalks out there, curving roadways if you live on a cul-de-sac, and that gives you flexibility you can adjust that spray pattern so you're not irrigating the sidewalk, you're not irrigating the walkway. As often as I'm out there and every day when we do evaluations, I always see homes and even ones that are running that are irrigating while we're out doing it. And so many of them are irrigating the sidewalk, the driveway, the roadway. I always tell everyone, as the way Manatee has grown, and I think all four of us are native from Manatee County, so we've seen it grow. Watering the roadways, your driveway, the sidewalk, it's not going to grow it. That's just wasted water. So that screw in the middle, that gives you options of adjusting that spray pattern. And you can go to any of the hardware supply place, Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace, or to irrigation stores, and you can even order it on Amazon. You can order ones that provide you the distance. So those caps are all replaceable. The body and the cap of the spray head, most of the time that is buried into the ground and it's sitting at sod level. We always recommend putting the donuts around them. Again, it protects the nozzle when it's retracted from the mower running over it and doing damage, the weed eater, but it also helps you to locate the heads when you need to do service on them. And beneath the nozzle, inside the riser, they all should have a filter in it. They all come with a filter. A lot of people take them out, throw them away, don't need that. All it is clogging up all the time. Well, take the filter out, then the nozzle's going to clog up. So there's that bit of maintenance you need to do. And that just shows the depiction, the picture down below, smaller areas of turf grass, and try to adjust them to minimize how much you're getting on the hard surfaces, be it sidewalk, driveway, roadway. I've seen a lot of homeowners that have gone to great effort to make it zero water getting on the hard surfaces. I've even had one homeowner take my challenge and he set up his survey levels and he failed. You will never eliminate all of it. The objective is minimize it, because all the water that goes on the sidewalk, the driveway, the roadway, it's all potentially water that is wasted, that is lost. Multi-streams, these are a new item that have come along over the past 5 years. And what they do, they operate, and you actually use the body of a pop-up spray head, but then they operate similar to a rotor. So they give you a better coverage. They put out a more definitive stream than the standard spray head nozzle, which most of the time comes out as a mist. As you can see there, it's putting out definitive stream, so you're getting bigger droplets onto that turf grass. But the features are the same. The PSI rating is the same from up to 30, 32 PSI. The distance is 4 feet to 20 feet. But because the droplet is larger, you have, again, it goes back to how long do you run that zone for, and you can, that's where all your water overage uses is that setting there as to how long you run it for. Many people set their timers up. They do a universal program, so every zone is 10 minutes. Well, does every zone have the same square footage, or does every zone have the same type of heads and same number of heads? More times than not, no, they do not. So you need to be able to set that zone up with its own runtime that is that is calculated for that zone based on how many gallons per minute, which you calculate from the number of heads and how much water is used. And then the square footage of that zone. So there are different ways you can calculate it. There are also calculators online that if you know the square footage of the zone, number of heads, what their GPM is, it will give you a random calculation. But never should all the zones be the exact same runtime. And that's the biggest factor that you can adjust is the runtime, because the zone size is set. Most of the times, number of heads out there are set. Can you adjust the type of heads or spray patterns? Yes. But the biggest factor is that runtime. But these, because of larger droplets going out, it's saturating that soil faster than a mist would. So they have the same usage characteristics of a standard spray head, but they work a lot like a rotor. So there's a large benefit to using the multi-streams. And there you go, a depiction compared to what the spray heads look like. You can see the water actually being distributed there instead of seeing a mist. You can see, actually, if you look down below it, you can see the water sitting on the blades of grass. So you know you're getting a good soak in there. Common problems, the incorrect sprinkler height. Believe it or not, when they're, even when the professionals put them in, they will set them at the height of your lawn. But over the years, as you mow, if you do not have the lawn dethatched, thatch will build up underneath your sod, thus raising the level of your sod to the point that the irrigation head, be it a spray head or a rotor, it's only rising up enough to where it's spraying directly into the grass right in front of it. Thus, it's reducing the overall coverage. Ways of correcting that, there are, you can go to any of the hardware stores and they have riser extensions. They'll come in a long 12-inch long tube, but you can break them off in half-inch increments, and you would unscrew the whole spray head body from the supply line, add that half-inch or calculate how high you need to raise it, and then put that number of extensions on there so that when it's set back down in, it's able to retract into the below the at the retraction, it's able to drop down below the elevation of the turf and the sod, but when it's activated and it rises up, it also extends above the turf grass, thus it's able to cover that full outwards to 20 feet. Another one is the spray head tilted over, like you see in the lower left. When they get tilted, and they always will, because again, the mower's running over them. If they're next to the driveway, cars running over them, and they'll get twisted, bent. But the more it's laid over, it reduces the distance of the spray pattern, so you're reducing its coverage. I recommend at least bi-monthly just doing a manual check of your system and doing an inspection, especially now that it's gotten warm. Throw your swim clothes on, and remember when you were a kid, go play in the sprinklers, because when I go out and do your MIL inspections, I do that every day. But it's warm. It's actually hot enough that the water coming out of there actually is kind of refreshing. But do an inspection of each zone. See, make sure they're rising to the full extent, that there's not like St. Augustine grass is notorious during the summer for it grows really fast, as most of you know, and it will actually tie the head down, so to where it cannot rise, and then it's just there below the edge of the turf grass, and it's jetting away, eroding away the soil underneath it. So check them. Look for clogs in the irrigation heads. Again, the mowers damage them, either from driving on them, or the weed eater, the stick edger can hit them and put cuts in them. It's something that it's a piece of equipment. It's actually the largest appliance that you purchase for your home, because it covers, if you have a half-acre lot, guess what? Your irrigation's covering a half-acre. For what is it? An acre's 43,560 square feet. So divide that in half. It's covering that much. So it is the largest appliance that you purchase for your home. And to coin a phrase, we see so many times that people live by the adage of set it and forget it. You know, as long as the grass is green, we're okay with it. But if you're using potable water to irrigate with, that's drinking water that we're losing, because once it goes down the drain, it's either going to the ponds, it's going to a water body, but it will never be potable again. So that's what my focus is to help educate people. Here's something, it's in another one of my programs, but the Earth's surface, what is it? 97% of the water on Earth is salt water. All the water, 97% of all the water on Earth is salt water. The next 2% is fresh water that we can't capture, be it it's in the glaciers, it's in the polar ice caps, but as it melts, where does it melt to? Into the oceans. It becomes salt water. So out of all the water on Earth, only 1% of it is potable water. So think about that one, and then you'll realize how important to, check your system, make sure there's no leaks or breaks, and that check the timing, check the time that it's actually running when you're setting up your controller, that it's running at the efficient times, and do the calculations for your zones. Again, 1% of water on all the Earth to provide water to the entire Earth's population. That's a very small number stacked up to a very large number. Micro irrigation, again, you would want to use this in landscape beds. The brown line there you see, that's a depiction of drip line. That is the most common that's used down in the landscape beds. It is actually would be laid on top of the soil, but then covered over with the mulch. You want to keep it covered by the mulch, because it's a polyvinyl, so it photo degrades, meaning the sun shines on it. Through the years, it will shorten the lifespan of it. But the benefit to it is, once you set it, it gives you a lot of flexibility. Again, very few landscape beds are they right angles, are they rectangles. Most of the landscape, a lot of curves in them, small areas, then they widen out. And that gives you a lot of flexibility to cover that entire area, because the way that works is there's emitters that are built into it, and they're set anywhere from, you can purchase it from an 8-inch spread between the emitters up to an 18-inch spread. And so you want it to cover that entire area, so it gives you flexibility to wrap it around plants, around trees, but to cover that entire area, but you're still only using, for the most part, less than 7 gallons per hour for the entire zone. So the micro sprays that you see in the lower right, you would use that to get coverage on your annuals, your semi-annuals, cover some smaller or larger areas, because with the drip line at each one of those emitters, the soil absorption, you'll see that as it drips, it only spreads out about 6 inches, 6 to 8 inches from the emitter. So those give you some flexibility, and you can plug them in to the drip line. So you only have to run one line, and you can use that drip line, but add the micro sprayers, and you can run the spaghetti line even up to hanging pods or to window boxes. Micro irrigation in the landscape beds give you tremendous flexibility.
You want to do another poll?
Yep, that's what I was going to suggest after I showed this picture.
Okay.
And again, here is a depiction. They've run the spaghetti line off of the drip line up into a potted plant. Could be multiple potted plants there that MaxiJet sprayer is now covering all of them. But the key thing, that, like you see in the lower left, that dripper there, it's dripping the water into the soil. You want to get the water always to the soil. I had took me a long time to convince my wife of this. During the summer, many of you go out and you'll see the plants. The flowers aren't looking so good. The leaves are wilted up. So let's run some irrigation on them, and they perk up. Yes, they perk up, but that's like if you were out in your lawn working all day and you get dehydrated, you get hot, so you either go jump in the shower or something to wash down. Well, spraying the water on top of the plant is just a temporary aesthetic, because all it's doing is cooling the plant down, cooling the leaves down, and they like to be cooled off just like we do. But as far as nutritional, unless the water's getting to the soil, there's no nutritional value, because the emitter, the spray head, the micro spray in the middle of the screen, if you look at the leaves of that vining plant there, you can see a waxy sheen on it. That's actually a waxy, it has a shiny coating on it. That's actually a waxy cuticle, and it's on there. The plant puts it on there to protect that leaf, because that's where it's developing its chlorophyll at, the sugars that the plant feeds on. So that waxy cuticle over top of that leaf prevents other things from getting inside the leaf, and the plant's not going to take the water up through there either. So Michelle, if you would like to do another poll.
Okay, it's up. This is just a 2-question quickie. Okay, it looks like the majority of people have answered, and we're split down the middle between the in-ground irrigation system, so 50-50. And most folks are using potable water from the city or county, and then next we have well, and a few with reclaimed both from county and stormwater sources. And then some folks aren't sure where their water's coming from. And that happens a lot of times. We come out on site and often are identifying the source of water for you.
We help to identify it to them, correct. Okay, that looks about like everybody. Have you closed in the polling, Michelle?
I have closed the polling, so
okay,
yep, we're
so
good.
We will resume. This is another depiction of the drip line working, and on the left you can see that plume. That's about how far from that line it will, the ground, and then that it will spread out from that emitter. So in the right one, you can see how they've wrapped it around trees, wrapped it around the plants. And, you know, it's good to put it down before you put the landscape in, because then you can set your plants in accordance to those emitters. But always you can add overhead emitters to that if you're seeing a lack of coverage. But the biggest thing is getting it down to the soil. This is a depiction of why you don't use micro irrigation in turf grass. I've had people ask me, you know, if it's ultra low volume, if it's measured in gallons per hour rather than gallons per minute. Every one of those little green spots amidst all the dead grass, that's where the emitter is in the drip line. So micro irrigation is solely inefficient for turf grass. You would not be able to run it long enough or get enough coverage with it for it to maintain turf grass. Its design is for those landscape beds, and a lot of homes that are going Florida friendly, most of their property then becomes landscape rather than turf grass. So you are cutting back that dependence upon high volume water usage. The wonderful rain sensing devices. Again, as I explained, this is a depiction of all four of them. The one on the left, that's the standard rain sensor. Most of them that I see out, they are actually wired to the controller, but there is wireless ones available. They work very well. With the controller in the garage, the rain sensor outside, and it gives you the ability to move that rain sensor to a place. You need to install it to where it's open to the sky. It has no coverage by plants or by roof line or by shrubs or any man-made objects. You want it open to the sky so it's catching that rainfall, and the most optimum place to locate it is actually as it's depicted there on the eave of the roof. Reason why, if it's we see many times they'll mount them on a PVC stand, and it'll either be in the landscape shrubbery. As the landscape shrubbery grows, the rain sensor either gets lost in the landscape, or when the hedge trimmers come out, they become a victim to the hedge trimmer. The other thing we see when they're mounted down low like that, they're either on the PVC or they'll mount them, connect them to a stem wall in close proximity to the air conditioner fan outside your house. If you're going to do that, make sure it's at least 5 feet away from the AC unit, because that fan, what it's doing is pulling the hot air out of your house and then helping to cool the coils down. So as it's pulling the hot air out, if that sensor's close to within 5 feet of it, it's going to cause it to dry out earlier, to stay dry longer during a rain event, and it's also going to shorten the life of that rain sensor. So the optimum location for it is up on the eave of the roof, open to the sky. That way, unless you're inspecting it or unless you have a service that inspects it, everybody else keeps their hands off of it, because many times we see that multiples get in there, know better, have a different opinion about it. They'll adjust the setting on the rain sensor to something you didn't like or something that was recommended, and so on, and it just causes problems. The top center, that is the sensor of the soil moisture sensor. Again, there would be a receiver unit that is connected to your controller inside your garage or outside, but they would come out, and it's typically a 3-day process. They would survey your property, find the point that is the best representation of your property. They do a soil compaction test and a perk test on it, a percolation test, and then they would install the sensor and they would set it for the percentage. Most around here, most of them are set at about 24%. So once it's detecting more than 24% in the soil, it will turn your system off. If you have high clay content in the soil, it's going to take more days of dry weather for it to get down to that, below that 24% threshold, for it to reactivate. If you're in sandy soil, it will drop below that 24% really fast. So there's a trade-off to it, but it's a lot more accurate than the rain sensor. Just below that is a depiction of the web-based systems. Again, that's something an app you download, you subscribe to, and they try to, they run off what they think the weather is here. But if you've lived in Florida long enough, I have a rock outside my back door, and that is actually between that and the metal that's inside my leg. Those are the two most accurate predictors of what the weather is in Florida. Because if the rock is hot to the touch, guess what? It's really sunny outside. If it's wet to the touch, it got rain. If you have to reach down a foot of water to grab the rock, you've had a flood. For those of our newly transplanted here, believe it or not, every now and then you'll see the rock get that white stuff on it. I think in my lifetime, it's happened 4 times here in Florida, in this part of Florida, but occasionally it will get snow. The metal in my leg from doing dumb things in my life, anytime the barometer starts dropping about 3 days beforehand, I can tell you it's going to storm. And then the one to the far right, that is the Evapotranspiration. That is a weather station. It's measuring rainfall, wind speed, relative humidity, temperature. It's kind of taking all those things into effect to adjust your system and to turn your system off. Again, these are all the depictions and various different types of the rain sensors. The one on the left is the standard rain sensor. That's actually a wireless model. Then the soil moisture sensor, and then the evapotranspiration. Rain sensors, do they work? If they're set up properly and maintained, absolutely, they do work. And part of our mobile irrigation lab, as we come out, again, that's one of the things we always test, or I will always test, and let you know what its outcome is. By the last poll, we've seen that most of you are on potable water. If being a resident in Manatee County, a home in Manatee County, or a small business that's a single structure, you qualify for us to come out and do to conduct the mobile irrigation lab inspection. If your home was built prior to March of 2003 and you're irrigating with potable water, you have a backflow preventer, and somewhere in the history of the home's water usage prior to March of 2003, you've shown 6 individual events, monthly events of high water consumption, meaning 6 events prior to March of 2003. They do not have to be consecutive. They can be spaced separately. But if you show 6 events, monthly events, showing high water consumption, meaning you've used in excess of 8,500 gallons in that time period, and you're irrigating with potable water, you can be qualified for the utilities department's outdoor irrigation and landscape rebate program. And what that provides for, if you meet those requirements and you do qualify, the county, i.e. the utilities department, will help you to pay for any of the repairs, upgrades, or recommended changes that we make in our reports, both irrigation and landscape. The cap amount on it is $2,500, meaning that if you were to expend $2,500, you can qualify for up to 50% of that back, meaning if you expended $2,500, you'd get $1,250 back, depending on the categories. But the one item that is 100% replacement value up to a set amount is the rain sensor, is the moisture interrupt switch. Because the state did make pass down a statute making it a requirement, Manatee County has adopted the policy, the resolution, that if you meet those requirements for the rebate, for the basic rain sensor, you can qualify 100% up to $125. Purchasing the standard rain sensor and having it installed, from what I've been told, is right around $90 to $100, depending on who you use or how you do it. For the soil moisture sensor, it's up to $250 cap, and for the Evapotranspiration system, the same. It's up to $250. You can go on Extension Services website or the Utilities Department website and look up the Outdoor Irrigation and Landscape Rebate Program, and all the information's there, or you can call our office and we'll be glad to get you that information. What makes an efficient irrigation system? Matched water source, pressure and flow, so you've got the right pressure for the type of irrigation you're using. If you're using rotors, well, you're going to need higher pressure. If you're using spray heads, less pressure. Proper irrigation hydrozoning. What that means is you plant your landscape doing hydrozoning. You want to put the same similar type plants in the same bed so they have the same irrigation requirements. So if you've got all turf grass, if it's narrow areas, you're going to use the spray heads. Large areas of turf grass, the rotors. In the landscape beds, depending how that bed is set up and planted, you will use either just the drip line or add in the microjets, the drip tubes, various things, depending how you set up that irrigation zone. Proper sprinkler head spacing. Again, you want that 80% overlap, at least 80% overlap, so you have interlocking coverage between the two irrigation heads. Proper sprinkler nozzle use. If you've got a real narrow area, the area between in the front lawn between the sidewalk and the roadway, typically no more than 3 feet wide. Well, they have irrigation heads that they're called end strips or side strips, and they're still just the basic irrigation nozzle, but it only puts out a very narrow stream to stay within that area, that narrow area of turf grass. Or if it's on the end, you would use the end strip, so it's the other side of it's not coming out on the turf grass. I apologize, I cannot mute that phone. And efficient programming of the coverage of the controller. So you're setting the controller up to irrigate on your irrigation days, you're irrigating at the right times, and the correct amount of time for that zone. So there's some homework to be done, calculating what your square footage is, what your gallons per minute is, and it's all included in this. And at the conclusion of this class, if you would like a copy of this presentation sent to you, in the chat section include your email, and we can email out a PDF version of this so you can go back through it on your own. I know we're covering a lot, and not being able to have any face-to-face contact makes it a little more difficult. I'm the type of person, if I put my hands on it, I learn it better. So, but efficient programming of the controller. I'll talk about it now. Setting up the controller. In the state of Florida, the state owns all the water, period, the end. Even though Manatee County owns Lake Manatee Reservoir, the water in it, the state owns. So the water management districts, there's 5 of them throughout the state. They are responsible for managing all the water. So they are the ones that actually hand down the restrictions. The current restrictions that are in place now, you can only irrigate twice per week per the water management district. Your watering days are established by your house number. If it ends in an odd number, your days are Wednesdays and Saturdays. If your house number ends in an even number, your watering days are Thursdays and Sundays. Common areas, if you're on the board for your community, for your HOA, the common areas are Tuesdays and Fridays. So those are your watering days. And there is no watering between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Those are our current restrictions. Again, you can go online. Manatee County Utilities Department makes that information available, but those are the restrictions handed down by the state. If you remember back in 2017, we went into a little bit of an extended drought, and the state put us into what they refer to as Zone 5 or Class 5 restrictions, where they restricted everybody to 1 day per week. That was all you could water, no matter where your water came from. The only irrigation that is not covered under the exemptions is micro irrigation. Micro irrigation, because it is ultra low volume, measured in gallons per hour, there are no restrictions for it at this time. Zone considerations, again, I was taught the old school way that if you say it multiple times, it sticks. Or if you remember back to when you were in college and the professor said that if you start seeing it up on the screen multiple times, it's something that's pretty important. So that's kind of how I set my programs up. Zone considerations, pressure to the zone, the pounds per square inch, you'll be able to use that information to calculate how many heads that you can use within that zone. And the coverage, if each head is 20 feet reach and you need to overlap by 16 feet, that gives you the over 18%. So you would use all that information to calculate how many heads you would use in that square footage of that zone. And is it feasible for you to maintain that PSI at the end of that run? Some of the zones, if it's a long run in the back, it may be a small square footage area because you've got to maintain that that pressure to the zone to get the heads to operate properly. Length of the pipe run. The longer the run, you have pressure loss. The way you combat that is you reduce the diameter of that. If you're going to have a long run, you would continue to reduce the diameter of the supply, the distribution pipe. If you start out with 3-inch, at the end of it, you may be down to, depending how long the run, you may be down to an inch diameter pipe that you had to use. So all that square footage is key, knowing that and being able to calculate it. Head-to-head coverage. Remember, you want a minimum of 80% coverage from each head to give that overlapping. Be sure to be consistent with irrigation head types. We see this a lot. If you have a zone, and it happens a lot of times when landscape breaks a head, or they tell you you've got a broken head, well, I can fix it. Well, what they do is they use what they have on their truck, what they have available. If that zone is made up of rotors, you want it to be all rotors because they're all going to be on the same pressure to the zone requirement. If they're all spray heads, if the zone is spray heads, they all need to be spray heads because spray heads generally need no more than 30, 32 PSI. So if a head breaks and, well, I've got this rotor that's capable, I've got that handy, I'll put it in place of that pop-up spray head. Well, that rotor now requires 50, 55 PSI to properly operate. You're overpressuring all the others. And what happens when it goes to that higher pressure, well, coming out of the spray heads, the droplet size it has an effect called nozzle shear. It reduces the droplet to a mist, so a much smaller micron size. So it's either going to not have adequate coverage because you're not running it long enough for a mist to provide the coverage, the soil coverage that you need, a saturation level, or it's going to overpressure the system and cause the other heads to fail sooner. Vice versa, if you have a zone of rotors and you put one spray head in place because that's what happened, again, you're going to have all those same effect. Or heaven forbid you add micro irrigation into a rotor zone, you're going to blow the entire zone because it's operating at a much higher. And then check your control valves. They should be inspected quarterly to make sure they're working properly. If you hire a service to find them, you definitely want to make sure that you inspect them quarterly, because that way you know how to find them. They stay uncovered and you're not having to pay that service again to come out and redo what you already did once, redoing the job again. So it's a good idea. Once a quarter, go out, check your system, walk through it, pick a warm day. Like I said, put on your swim clothes or shorts and go have fun, play in the irrigation like you did when you were a kid. This shows an example of efficient irrigation principles, what I was saying with hydrozoning. So you're planting in each of the zones whatever turf grass or plants, shrubs, trees, that they would use the same type of irrigation. In that zone A, they've got a couple of irrigation bed or plant beds there, but the rest of it is, I can't really make out if it's turf. I don't think it's turf grass. So you'd use micro irrigation there. Zone B's, C, and D. Again, you got all landscaping. So in the shrub zones in C, and D, you would use more of the drip line. Zone B, more of the, you'd still use micro irrigation, but it's using the maxi jet sprayers, the overhead. Zone G is a depiction of turf grass. So depending on how big that area is, showing 580 square feet. If you've got the zone pressure coverage, you could use either rotors or pop-up spray heads. You just want the same requirement within each zone. So each of the hydro zones, they have the same watering requirements. So they're going to run the same, you know, the plants or whatever you're supporting there is going to run for that amount of time to provide sufficient watering for those plants to survive or the turf grass to survive. This is a depiction of hydrozoning, but it's also a depiction, those circles are showing you the head-to-head coverage. Zone 1 is going to be all spray head. Actually, you can do that with rotors between using 180-degree pattern, 90-degree patterns. It's a little bit larger, but if your square footage on the front is smaller, then you would reduce it down to the standard spray heads. Zone 2 and 4, that narrow side between the two houses, a lot of the communities we go into, as we start to do our evaluation, and I start that walk between the two houses, a lot of the communities, they're really close together. And prior to working here at the county, I was in private practice with an environmental consulting firm, and I did a lot of wetland delineations. Well, what I'm looking for in those zones, when they're narrow together, the dollarweed that you see in your lawn, that is actually a wetland indicator plant. So if you, in the areas in between the houses, that's real narrow, both of you are irrigating at the same time because you're on the same side of the street, it gets wet. Ways to combat that is get to know your neighbor, and y'all guys can alternate watering times or the run times and or watering days. Again, Manatee County sets, or the state water management districts set the days. They employed the KISS method, keep it simple, by saying odd numbers Wednesdays and Saturdays, even numbers Thursdays and Sundays. Manatee County and the Utilities Department, they allow the communities to combat this, some adjustment that to where the communities, even though you can't water more than 2 days, they can adjust by individual houses, especially if they're using pumps to draw from the retention ponds, that they'll set the days. But if your community's not like that, simple way is have good relations with your neighbor, and you two combine, and it'll minimize that oversaturation that leads to weeds and fungus in your lawn. Because dollarweed in the wetlands, it's referred to as pennywort, and both of them fall under the genus family of hydrocotyle. It is a wetland indicator plant. Zone 3, the backyard, again, depending on its size and what your water supply PSI is, there you could use either rotors, or if it's a smaller backyard, the pop-up spray heads, but calculate it for what their coverage is. If it's a 20-foot coverage, well, you want to get that 80%, so you want it overlapping by at least 16 feet, 16, 17 feet. Ideally, if you can do it, you get 100% of overlap, and that guarantees you the appropriate coverage, but it'll allow you to also reduce your runtime because you're super saturating. Each head is covering 100% from one to the other. And then all the landscape beds, again, landscape, if you want to irrigate it, use micro irrigation. If you're going to change the annuals out, every year. If it's an area of landscape that is strictly perennial shrubs and there's not a man-made barrier between it and the turf grass, over a period of time, their roots are going to get out to that turf grass zone. So that's where they're taking their water in. And you can eliminate irrigation to that landscape altogether, just activating it when we're in drought period or, during the week when because you control your controller, you have that flexibility. That area just to the, where you see the doorway entry, just below the doorway entry, it's confined by the sidewalk, the walkway, the entryway foyer. You would always want to have, for the most part, have some type of micro irrigation in there because their roots cannot get out to that turf grass zone. Some of the nozzle selection, this is an example of that narrow area between the house. And you can see where the spray heads are up against the house and they're reaching over into the neighbor's side of it. And if you have irrigation, most likely your neighbor's going to have irrigation. And so if they run theirs per the prescribed days by the state, you both are soaking that area, turning it into a wetland. So it becomes, it becomes super saturated, and that leads to mold and fungus in your grass, all types of different disease within the grasses. It can even drown some of the plants. A lot of the zoysia grass doesn't have a high tolerance, it's a drought tolerant plant, so it does not need as much water. But when you go, if you're doing the repairs or upgrades yourself, when you go to the supplier, look at the nozzles and, pick out what best suited for you. 45 degree, 90, 180, 360 degree. Look at the radius of the spray. Is it a 10 foot, 8, all the way up to 20 foot? That strip between the sidewalk and the roadway, that narrow strip of grass, look for down there at number 5. Is a depiction of the end strips, multi-streams and the end strips and the third one from the bottom is a depiction of the strip series, which they do an end strip or a center strip, which it does a bow tie effect. So you're not throwing, irrigating heavily the sidewalk and the roadway, because again, they're not going to grow as much as the traffic shows. We need more roadways and bigger roadways. Irrigating it's not going to do it. You've heard me multiple times go over, you want to look for that head-to-head coverage. I'm sure if I asked and you could respond, I'm sure all of you would say at minimum of 80%. That's what you need, because the one on the right is actually irrigating the turf grass that is next adjacent to the one on the left. So that's the reason for the overlap. And that's for the pop-up spray heads, for the multi-streams, and for the rotors. You always want to have that overlap. And the better that head-to-head coverage is, the better the saturation is going to be in the soil. So you can reduce that runtime rather than, if it's only 20%, you've got to run it longer to get that saturation all the way across that zone to support whatever grass you have there. Remember I said if you see it twice, it's important. Well, here it is again. So It's always done in some manner of circle, and as you can see by that depiction, within whatever the area is, I always navigate along by the front, left side, back, right side. When I prepare the reports, I will put in a description that generally starts with that. It's the front turf grass area adjacent to. But when I'm doing an evaluation, that's what I'm looking for. That's the reason why when I go out and do the evaluation, I'm getting wet, because I'm walking through your zones. I'm not going to melt. I'm 55 years old. I haven't melted away yet. But I'm walking through there so I can see your coverage, looking for that overlap of coverage, looking for what it's covering, looking for breaks, leaks. And these are all things you can do. It is the largest appliance you buy for your property. And back to the old adage, it's made by man. A man has his hands on it. It's surely going to break eventually sometime.
Hey, Don, we're kind of going over on time.
Yep.
I don't know if you were.
We're at the end. We're
okay.
at the end. Yep. Yep. There's your controller. Again, like I said, it's basic, extra simple. You turn the dial and start filling in. The on and off is for manual run. Up arrow adds time, down arrow decreases time. And you would just, and the auto's where you want it to set. Your watering start times, you want to run that in the early morning hours so the ground has time to percolate it before it evaporates off. But there's no watering between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Sorry about that. Your days you run, set it up for the day that you are set to run on by the state, the county, or your community. And that's your run time. Each one of those would be a zone. This one's designed for 12 zones, and you would add how much time you want to run that zone after you do the calculation. This is a chart that gives you a basic idea of how long you should run the zone, depending on the spray pattern and the coverage. And again, we can send this whole program to you. Calibration, what you're looking for is that overlap of coverage and how much water how long you have to run it to get that water. You can use tuna cans to put out there to calculate that, but you can also contact our office and have an evaluation done, and we provide free calibration kits as we do. That's it. If you have any questions, you can contact myself. There's my phone number, my extension, my email. Currently, I'm working out of office, but I check my emails daily, my voicemail daily, and we have ways of getting back with you. And there's the